Hey everyone, and welcome to Groove Builders, the show where we create together. I'm your host, Disorderly Cone, and in this episode, we're finally starting our series on 3D printing. We got some really cool projects to come up, and some of them haven't even been seen on YouTube yet. But before we can get into those projects, we should really start with the basics, like how does 3D printing work? And if you're looking to purchase one, what are some things you might want to look into? And finally, once you have a 3D printer, what are some cool upgrades that we can add? These are some good questions. Let's start with that first one. How does 3D printing work? There are many different types of 3D printers out there, and in this particular series we're going to be talking about fused deposition modeling printers, or also known as FDM printers. That's this guy right back here. Now, these printers all start the same. You need to take a 3D model, either purchased from the online stores or made by yourself. You then take that file and insert it into a slicer program. This program takes that 3D model and then cuts it into several layers. Sometimes this can be into the thousands depending on how big your file is. Once your slicer has cut that file up, it's now time to take that file and put it into your 3D printer. This is now where your printer goes to work. Now, how we make the magic happen here is we take our filament and feed it into our extruder. Our filament comes in a wide variety of different materials and colors, so it really comes down to what you're looking to build as to what filament you put into your printer. Personally, I have PLA here, actually PLA Plus here, black, for some of the things that I've been constructing. Again, more on that in a different video. Now, our extruder very precisely feeds all of this filament into our hot end, where it's heated up to a very hot temperature that we set inside of our slicer. Then, our little hot end here moves along an X, Y, and Z axis, slowly extruding the different bits of plastic onto our bed. Over time, this builds up in those layers that we created in our slicer. And at the very end, we have something really cool, like our benchies here, or pretty much anything that you can come out of your imagination. Now that we understand how our 3D printer works, we need to discuss what kind of 3D printer you want to buy. Well, that really comes down to what you're looking to print. Are you looking to print small things? Are you looking to print big things? Are you looking to print kind of weapons or kind of trinkets and toys? Are you looking to print hooks? Are you looking to print car parts? Are you looking to print armor? Really kind of cool armor like the Iron Man series, or maybe a Mandalorian? There's all kinds of really cool stuff that we can print. But again, it comes down to how much work we want to do. If you buy a big printer, you'll be able to print bigger prints, like full-size helmets if you're into that kind of thing. But our smaller printers allow us to have a lot more printers in a smaller area. This is very useful if you have a print farm. That's where people have multiple printers printing the same thing. But it's also really useful for our wallets, because typically the smaller printers tend to cost a lot less. But they are also usually a lot less capable. Like I said, smaller print volumes, and also sometimes you might see artifacts on your prints because they're just not as stable as some of the bigger printers. Personally, I recommend this one right here. This is my Ender 3 Pro, and unfortunately with 3D printers, every single time you buy one, a new one comes out a few minutes later. It's kind of like the iPhone. But that being said, there's some really cool 3D printers out there that are at this kind of size that won't break your bank. This one here was only about $300 Canadian, and since then it actually has dropped quite a bit. So again, the Creality Ender 3 Pro is a great little printer to start with. That being said, there are a few things you need to know about 3D printers and some of the knockoffs that you see in the market. Just like our 3D metal models out there, there's the name brand stuff and there's the knockoff stuff. Some of the knockoff brands out there can be really good, and some of them have technology in them that doesn't exist in these guys, which makes them good. But overall, you really kind of do want to stay on brand. This way, if there's any kind of technical issues, you have somewhere to go and at least try to get some help. What I really like about the Ender 3 Pro and the Creality stuff here is that there's a really big online community that if I have any kind of problem, I can jump on, explain what the issue is, and generally get somebody to help me with that issue. Some of you might have seen me on there already helping others with some of their issues, because I feel like once you learn something, especially a trade like this, it's really important to help others that are trying to learn it too. So to summarize purchasing your first 3D printer, I recommend knowing what you're looking to print so you can get the appropriate size 3D printer. Knowing your budget so that you can make sure that you're buying the best in that range. And lastly, try to make sure you stay on an actual brand so you don't end up with a whole bunch of heartache and a lot, and I mean a lot, of stress. Sweet doodly diddly 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 doo. Now, we've looked into what a 3D printer is. We've talked about what things you might want to know when buying your first 3D printer. Now let's talk about some of the cool stuff, the upgrades. Now, a lot of these things you can actually purchase with the 3D printer when you first buy it. Some of them already come installed, which, to be totally honest, save yourself some money. If they come with the upgrades, I would totally grab it, unless it makes sense to grab them individually, which, to be totally honest, I don't think that's true. I think it's better to actually buy everything at once, and that way, when you're done installing it, you're kind of done and you can level everything and continue on printing with your life. Now, before I let that tangerine get away with me here, let's talk about the most important upgrade that I've done so far. And that is changing the bed from the original magnetic flimsy bed over to a glass bed. The reason why this is an important upgrade is that this little heating plate down here can sometimes come warp. And that's not just on Creality, that's on a lot of different 3D printers out there. By going to glass, you're pretty much ensuring that the entire thing is going to be flat the entire way around. Now, this Creality glass plate was a $25 upgrade. Depending on what kind of printer you're looking to go for, it will already come with a glass bed. Again, that's a highly recommended upgrade for any kind of 3D printing. The next upgrade I recommend looking into is upgrading the springs, which are just below your bed. These springs help everything kind of stay level, and the ones that come with the Ender 3 Pro are kind of equivalent to pen springs. And what I mean by that is when it gets hot or cold, these springs will tend to kind of either loosen or tighten. Now, that is a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing because it means everything's working properly. Bad thing because that means that when the bed is heated, sometimes the plate can kind of warp a little bit. And if we're printing, that's a bad thing because we need everything to be super level. Now, the way we overcome this is by upgrading these springs to a thicker spring, which are available on Amazon and they're pretty cheap. Now, these springs don't move as much when we have that heating and cooling effect, allowing this whole plate to stay level a lot longer. Now, reaching into the community a little bit, there's some people out there that recommend bushings, and while I haven't tried that method yet, it is something that I'm looking into, maybe onto my next printer. Another really important upgrade, which is actually a pretty cheap one to do, is upgrading the tube up here, which feeds your filament from the extruder into your hot end. The one that comes originally on the Ender 3 Pro is pretty good, but if you're printing materials that need a little bit of a higher temperature, you might find that the tube melts, and this can create clogging and all kinds of things you don't really want with a 3D printer. By upgrading to this Capricorn tubing here, we can print things at a lot higher temperature without that tube melting. So far, I've only ever had one clog with this tube, and it really just took me cutting a little bit off and feeding it back in to fix it. So again, another really highly recommended upgrade. Another great little upgrade that you can actually print right from your printer is the side filament holder here. This is a great little upgrade to keep everything kind of in a smaller package, but you do have to make sure that you have a stable surface. As we put this filament over here to the side, you will have a little bit more of a jerking kind of motion, just because it is out there on a little bit of an arm. Having it above your printer is definitely more stable. So again, if you're going to use this upgrade, just make sure you have a really stable base. This is a feeler gauge. It gauges your feelings when you're dealing with 3D printing, and as everyone knows out there, it can be a really stressful thing. So by pulling this out, you can see how much of a hard time you're having, and then gauge, based on that, how much coffee you need or tea, or maybe how long of a walk you need to take your dog for, which they love, by the way. Just kidding, I'm a dad, I have to throw in those jokes where I can. Now, these feeler gauges, though, are really, really important and awesome, by the way. Instead of using a piece of paper to go and put underneath your hot end and between your bed to see if everything is level, this one here is a piece of metal. And that makes for a really, really precise measurement between your hot end and the bed. Now, it's important to make sure that your feeler gauges are in the range of 0.04 millimeter. And these are generally available on Amazon for $13. So for a $13 piece of kit to make sure that everything is level, that's going to take away a lot of your headaches when you first get into 3D printing, this is a great little piece of kit. And finally, the last little upgrade I want to recommend is another one that we can print from our 3D printer, and that is this little extruder knob on the back. I know it's a silly little upgrade, but it's an incredibly useful one, especially when you just get your 3D printer. The reason why this is a useful piece of kit is because it allows you to easily change out your filaments. Of course, don't forget to disable your steppers in the settings, otherwise you can possibly kind of wear out that motor over time. And also, you kind of want to be careful back there too, because if you purchase the Ender 3 Pro, your extruder in the back there is made of plastic, and if you push too hard, you can snap it, which means you need to upgrade to a metal one. And that is also a really good upgrade. But I'm going to save those kinds of upgrades for another video. Alright Groove Builders, that brings us to the end of our show. I had a really good time explaining the basics of 3D printing, and if you guys had a good time, don't forget to press that like button. If this video helped you out, press subscribe as well, as we got all kinds of really cool videos coming out in the future. Until next time Groove Builders, keep building! I can't wait to show you the cool projects I got planned. And I mean it. Like guys, the stuff is coming. Woo-hoo-hoo!